Technically, this is the introduction to another terrific episode of How America Works. But if you're on the keto diet, or if you're one of those people who orders the burger without the bun, you might want to look at this as a disclaimer instead, because what you're about to see is going to make you want a long list of delicious things you're not allowed to have. I'm talking about bread and pasta and bagels and biscuits and muffins and noodles and cereal bars and beer. I'm talking about wheat, the critical grain that is in 99% of every single thing that's good and delicious, like this piece of chocolate chip almond cake, which has been calling to me all day and to which I now feel entitled. Point is, wheat's been on the menu for over 17,000 years. And here in this country, it's an $11 billion business. In other words, keto schmeedo. Wheat is still an essential ingredient of how America works.
Well, it wouldn't be America the Beautiful without your amber waves of grain, and boy, do we have a lot of those. So many, in fact, that the wheat growers of our nation will plant and harvest an area the size of Georgia with this one crop alone. Why so much? Well, aside from the fact that your average American will eat 180 pounds worth of it every year, wheat's also pretty useful for other things, like the glue on your stamps, the paper under your pen, and the rubbing alcohol, wherever you keep that. But, as you might expect, the bulk of it, by far, will wind up in our pantries as one of the many thousands of foods made possible by wheat, or, more often than not, wheat flour, which is why the U.S. relies on some 150 mills scattered across the country to keep that flour in steady supply. Take Seymour Milling Company in eastern Indiana, for instance, where a crew of 40 men and women work tirelessly to turn raw kernels of wheat into more than 5 different varieties of flour. But doing that today will be no cakewalk, because thanks to an unseasonable warm snap, every farmer in the region is harvesting their wheat crop early, leaving the folks at Seymour to receive and process more than 1 million pounds of it before closing time. It's the kind of quota that promises to push both man and machinery to the max today. And among them, millers like Anthony Lakin.
So the wheat comes in from the farmers, and then we'll start breaking up the kernel and separating it and sending it where it needs to go. And it's my job just to make sure we're making the right product, make sure everything's going where it needs to be.
Here on the milling room floor, Anthony can turn a kernel of wheat into any number of products, each with their own special balance of that kernel's 3 main components: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Run them all through a series of roller mills, and you'll wind up with whole grain flour. Get rid of the bran and the endosperm while rolling, and you've got wheat germ. Sift out the bran and germ, and now we're talking white flour. Sounds straightforward enough, but with 23 roller mills doing all that grinding and sorting at the same time, Anthony must keep a watchful eye on every stage of the process.
This is our first break roll. The object of this roll stand is to pretty much break open the kernel. That's its main job.
And since this batch of flour will be of the white variety, these kernels will only get more and more refined from here until they take on the properties that Anthony's looking for.
That right there is our bread money. A lot of good flour. This is our first quality flour, not that high in content or brand.
Working in tandem, Anthony and his colleagues will mill about 900,000 pounds of this flour alone. But since today's quota also calls for another 100,000 pounds of whole wheat flour, he'll need to get that going as well.
The whole wheat, we use all 100% of the kernel. You can see the higher bran content. It has more protein, and that's what we're gonna be changing the roll stands and switching stuff over to get to this flour.
For starters, Anthony heads to the control room to adjust some settings. Then it's back to the roller mills to ensure they're fine-tuned for whole wheat production.
So right now, when we're switching on to whole wheat, break that brand. So what we're trying to do, we gotta tighten up. This makes us grind a little harder. Easier to break that brand.
But even though Anthony makes it look like business as usual, there's more to this process than meets the eye. And with 5 years at Seymour, he's just about seen it all.
When you are switching over to a different flour, there could be plugs, so you gotta watch out for that. You gotta watch your lines, watch your roll stands, watch where you're grinding. Just make sure everything's going where it needs to be, and try to do it pretty efficient.
But midway through the changeover, the system pipes up with one sound that no miller wants to hear.
Right now, something just shut us down. We're gonna go check what it is.
When pushing to pump out record amounts of product, the odd mechanical issue is bound to crop up, especially on this shelf. But for the more serious stuff, Seymour relies on a team of 4 maintenance workers to keep the whole mill up and running, and few know how to do that better than Chad Wilson.
You got to be really good at troubleshooting. You know, you got to work under pressure. Obviously, if the mill's down, we're not producing flour, and you know that affects everything.
And wouldn't you know it, Chad's already en route to a piece of machinery that's threatening to put production behind schedule. A cyclone airlock motor that's responsible for moving product to the machine below, but instead is sitting idle.
This part of the mill is shut down. This is probably one of the most vital parts of the mill, so we need to do this as fast as we possibly can. So here's the motor we're gonna have to replace today. Obviously we can see the problem with the motor right there where it's leaking out of the seal. We're gonna take this cover off, which is gonna give us access to pull the rest of the motor off.
On pulling the cover, it's just as Chad thought. A leaky seal has taken this motor completely out of commission. But no time to tinker with it now. Instead, he'll swap in a new one to get the mill back online, just as soon as he and his partner Doug get the old motor out of the way.
Going up. You can see on this motor, this seal also was going on the backside. So good thing we ended up changing the whole motor, because if we would have just changed the front seal, there would have been no way to get to the back seal.
With the old motor set aside, all that remains is to install the new one.
Get this thing bolted in, and we'll have them fired up to verify that everything's working properly here. Can you go ahead and fire that 4016, that motor up? Put it in hand, please, and so we can verify it. Everything looks good. The motor's turning fine. Should be good.
And it's a good thing, too, because with freshly harvested wheat already filing in by the truckload, Seymour's going to need all the help they can get. But they're not the only ones racing to move some grain today. So, too, are the 250 farms that supply this facility with raw product. Places like Adams Farms, where proprietor Craig Adams has about 200 acres worth of crop to get out of the ground while it's still worth top dollar.
We are harvesting our soft red winter wheat crop. We've been doing this since 1977, and this very well potentially could be our best wheat crop we've ever had.
But before he can harvest the last of his wheat, Craig will first need to finish up a field he started this morning, one that still holds value in the form of straw.
We're harvesting straw for our own use, and also there's a market in the horse market for straw for stables and landscaping and things of that nature.
At about $4 per bale, this farm will yield about $25,000 in straw alone. And to make sure he's getting every last penny of that, Craig relies on what's shockingly known as a baler.
We're going to harvest straw. We've got it in windrows, feeding this windrow into the bale chamber. It's forming a bale roughly 34 inches long and 18 by 14 around. It's going up the chute, twisting on the half, coming down into 10 bale groups.
Then again, those bales can only be made when Craig's equipment is running as it should. And with so many moving parts, jostling across a field, that's not always the case.